Senator Elizabeth Warren thought she was about to expose another wealthy celebrity's tax avoidance schemes on live television. Tom Cruise appeared to be just another Hollywood elite using accountants and offshore shelters to avoid paying taxes. Exactly the type Warren loved to destroy publicly. Mr. Cruise, your financial advisors have helped you avoid millions in taxes that should fund schools, infrastructure, and healthcare, she said with her trademark progressive fire. But when Tom Cruise opened his financial briefing to reveal what he'd really been paying, everything changed in ways that would shock the entire economic establishment. And if you want to see how Hollywood's biggest action star exposed America's most progressive senator using tax evidence that revolutionized economic policy, watch this entire story and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking confrontations that Washington tried to classify. The Hart Senate office building buzzed with anticipation that Wednesday morning in April 2026. The Senate Finance Committee hearing on tax avoidance in the entertainment industry had attracted national attention because it represented Senator Elizabeth Warren's latest campaign against what she characterized as wealthy elites who manipulated tax law to avoid paying their fair share, while ordinary Americans struggled with the full burden of government funding. Senator Elizabeth Warren, at 77, had spent over a decade in the Senate building her reputation as the most effective progressive critic of wealth inequality, corporate tax avoidance, and financial system manipulation. Her background as a Harvard Law School professor specializing in bankruptcy and financial regulation had given her the expertise to understand complex financial arrangements that other politicians couldn't effectively challenge. Warren's approach to Senate hearings was legendary for its preparation, intellectual rigor, and devastating effectiveness at exposing corporate wrongdoing and elite tax manipulation. Her questioning style combined academic precision with populist moral authority, making her one of the most feared interrogators in Congress when it came to financial accountability and economic justice. The senator's political brand was built on her ability to translate complex financial concepts into accessible moral arguments about fairness, opportunity, and the social contract that enabled wealthy individuals and corporations to build their success. Her attacks on tax avoidance weren't just policy critiques. They were moral indictments of a system that she argued favored the wealthy at the expense of working families. Warren's decision to target the entertainment industry reflected her broader strategy of using high-profile examples to illustrate systemic problems with American tax policy. Hollywood celebrities were perfect targets because their wealth was visible, their tax strategies often complex, and their public platforms made them symbols of elite privilege that resonated with progressive voters. Tom Cruise, at 64, had been specifically invited to testify because his financial arrangements reportedly included multiple corporate entities, international production deals, and sophisticated tax planning strategies that Warren's staff believed represented classic examples of wealthy tax avoidance. Initial research had suggested that Cruise's financial structure involved offshore companies, foreign tax credits, and corporate deductions that minimized his effective tax rate. What Warren's staff hadn't anticipated was that Cruise had spent months preparing for this hearing with the same intensity and thoroughness that he brought to his film roles. His financial team had assembled comprehensive documentation of his tax payments, charitable contributions, and economic impact that would challenge every assumption underlying Warren's tax strategy. The hearing room was packed with financial journalists, tax policy experts, progressive activists, and entertainment industry representatives, all recognizing that this confrontation would set precedents for how wealthy individuals and corporations could be held accountable for their tax obligations. Tom Cruise entered the Senate hearing room that morning. He carried himself with the same focused intensity that had made him legendary in Hollywood. His presence in a Senate Finance Committee hearing represented the intersection of entertainment wealth and tax policy in ways that previous generations of actors and senators had never experienced. Senator Warren opened the hearing with her characteristic combination of moral authority and financial expertise, designed to establish the framework that would position Cruise as a symbol of elite tax avoidance rather than individual wrongdoing. Mr. Cruise, thank you for appearing before this committee, Warren began. her voice carrying the progressive fire that had made her a hero to millions of Americans who felt abandoned by an economic system that favored the wealthy. You represent one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood, with reported earnings exceeding $100 million annually. Yet my staff's research suggests your effective tax rate is significantly lower than what middle-class families pay. The opening was calculated to establish the central theme of Warren's attack, that wealthy celebrities like Cruz were gaming the tax system, while ordinary Americans bore the full burden of funding government services that everyone used. Cruz responded with respectful attention that suggested he understood the seriousness of the charges while preparing to challenge the underlying assumptions. Senator Warren, I appreciate the opportunity to address these important questions about tax policy and economic responsibility. Warren immediately pressed her advantage, using specific financial details that her staff had researched to demonstrate Cruz's alleged tax avoidance. Mr. Cruz, your production companies are incorporated in multiple states and countries. Your residency is structured to minimize state tax obligations, and your income is channeled through corporate entities that significantly reduce your personal tax liability. The accusations were specific and suggested extensive research into Cruz's financial arrangements, positioning Warren as having superior knowledge of his tax strategies and their implications for overall tax fairness. According to our analysis, Warren continued, your effective tax rate over the past 5 years has been approximately 23%, while middle-class families in Massachusetts pay effective rates exceeding 28% when all federal, state, and local taxes are included. The comparison was designed to outrage viewers and position Cruz as benefiting from tax advantages unavailable to ordinary Americans. Fitting perfectly into Warren's narrative about wealth inequality and tax unfairness, Cruz's response would begin his systematic challenge to every assumption underlying Warren's attack, while demonstrating preparation that exceeded the senator's research capabilities. Senator Warren, I appreciate your concern about tax fairness, and I share your commitment to ensuring that everyone pays their appropriate share, Cruz replied, opening a comprehensive financial briefing that he had clearly prepared extensively for this moment. However, I believe your analysis may be based on incomplete information about both my tax payments and the broader economic impact of entertainment industry investments. The response immediately suggested that Cruz was prepared to engage in detailed financial analysis rather than simply defending his personal tax strategies, indicating a level of preparation that Warren hadn't anticipated. Let me provide you with comprehensive documentation of my actual tax payments over the past decade. Cruz continued, connecting a tablet to the hearing room's display system and revealing financial data that would shock everyone present. The screen showed detailed tax returns and payment records that immediately challenged Warren's allegations about tax avoidance. Over the past 10 years, I have paid $847 million in federal income taxes, $312 million in state taxes, and $89 million in local taxes, for a combined tax burden of $1.248 billion. The numbers were staggering and completely contradicted Warren's narrative about tax avoidance, demonstrating that Cruz had actually paid enormous amounts in taxes rather than minimizing his obligations. Warren attempted to challenge the figures through skepticism about their completeness or accuracy. Mr. Cruz, these numbers may represent total payments, but they don't address the question of whether you paid your fair share based on your actual income and wealth. Cruz's response would deliver the most devastating challenge to Warren's progressive tax arguments, while demonstrating his understanding of both tax policy and economic impact. Senator Warren, let me address that question by showing you the relationship between my tax payments and the broader economic activity that my work generates. He clicked to comprehensive economic analysis that revealed the full scope of his financial impact on the American economy. My film productions over the past decade have generated $23.7 billion in domestic economic activity, created 127,000 jobs across 47 states, and contributed $4.2 billion in additional tax revenue from employees, vendors, and related businesses. The economic multiplier effect was enormous and positioned Cruz's tax payments as just one component of his much larger contribution to government revenue and economic activity. Furthermore, Cruz continued, "My production investments have revitalized filming in American cities, created thousands of high-skilled technical jobs, and kept entertainment production in the United States rather than moving to countries with lower costs and tax rates." The argument reframed the entire discussion from individual tax avoidance to broader economic policy about how to maintain American competitiveness in global entertainment markets. Warren was beginning to realize that her attack was facing more sophisticated economic analysis than she had prepared for. But she attempted to maintain her position through appeals to tax fairness and progressive principles. Mr. Cruz, regardless of broader economic impact, don't you agree that wealthy individuals should pay higher effective tax rates than middle-class families? Cruz's response would expose the complexity of tax policy analysis while challenging Warren's simplified comparisons. Senator Warren, I absolutely agree that tax policy should be fair and progressive. But I think accurate analysis requires comparing equivalent tax situations rather than mixing different types of tax obligations. He clicked to detailed analysis of tax rate comparisons that revealed the flaws in Warren's methodology. The 23% rate that your staff calculated includes only federal income taxes and excludes the corporate taxes paid by my production companies, the employment taxes paid on behalf of thousands of workers, and the state and local taxes paid across multiple jurisdictions. The technical analysis was sophisticated and demonstrated that Warren's comparison had been misleading by excluding significant categories of taxes that Cruz's activities generated. When all taxes are included, personal income taxes, corporate taxes, employment taxes, property taxes, and sales taxes, my effective rate exceeds 43%, which is significantly higher than what any middle-class family pays. Cruz continued, displaying comprehensive tax calculations. Warren was now facing technical tax analysis that exceeded her staff's research and challenged her fundamental arguments about tax fairness and elite avoidance. But more importantly, Cruz continued, I'd like to address the broader question of how tax policy should encourage productive economic activity rather than simply maximizing revenue from high earners. He clicked to analysis of international tax competition and entertainment industry mobility that would completely reframe the discussion. Other countries actively compete for entertainment production through tax incentives, job creation, and economic development. If American tax policy makes domestic production uneconomical, we lose not just my tax payments, but the much larger economic activity and job creation that my work generates. The economic policy argument was sophisticated and positioned high earner tax rates as just one component of broader economic competitiveness rather than simple questions of fairness or progressive taxation. Warren attempted one final challenge based on her core progressive principles about wealth inequality and social responsibility. Mr. Cruz, even accepting your economic arguments, don't you agree that wealthy individuals have a moral obligation to pay more in taxes to support social programs and reduce inequality? Cruz's response would deliver his most powerful argument while demonstrating genuine commitment to social responsibility that transcended simple tax obligations. Senator Warren, I absolutely agree about social responsibility, which is why I'd like to show you my charitable contributions and direct community investments over the past decade. He clicked to comprehensive documentation of philanthropic activities that would shock Warren and the committee. In addition to the $1.248 billion in taxes I've paid, I've contributed $394 million to educational programs, healthcare initiatives, and disaster relief efforts, primarily focused on communities where my films have been produced. The charitable contributions were enormous and demonstrated that Cruz's social responsibility extended far beyond tax obligations to direct community investment and social impact. These contributions include funding for 23 schools in economically disadvantaged communities, medical equipment for 47 hospitals, and scholarship programs that have provided college education for over 2,100 students from low-income families. Cruz continued. The specific examples were compelling and positioned Cruz as someone who understood social responsibility through direct action rather than just tax payments. Furthermore, Cruz concluded, these investments are targeted based on community needs and direct impact rather than government allocation, ensuring that resources reach people who need them most efficiently and effectively. The argument about charitable efficiency versus government spending was sophisticated and challenged Warren's assumption that higher taxes automatically translated to better social outcomes. Warren sat back in her chair, realizing that her planned attack on Cruz had been completely reversed by evidence and analysis that exceeded her preparation and challenged her core arguments about tax policy and social responsibility. "Mr. Cruz," she said quietly, her tone completely changed from the beginning of the hearing, "your financial documentation is more comprehensive than my staff anticipated." The admission represented a significant moment for Warren, who rarely found herself out-prepared or facing superior financial analysis from the subjects of her investigations. The hearing concluded with Warren acknowledging that Cruz's tax situation was more complex than her initial research had suggested and requesting additional hearings to examine how entertainment industry tax policy could balance fairness with economic competitiveness. Within days, Cruz's testimony was being analyzed by tax policy experts, economists, and progressive activists who recognized that his arguments had challenged fundamental assumptions about wealth taxation, economic policy, and social responsibility. The confrontation became a case study in how complex financial analysis could challenge simplified political narratives about tax fairness, while demonstrating that individual cases might not fit broader ideological frameworks about wealth and taxation. Tom Cruise had not only defended his tax practices, but had contributed to more sophisticated understanding of tax policy, economic impact, and social responsibility that transcended simple progressive versus conservative debates about wealth and fairness. Senator Warren had discovered that her commitment to tax fairness and economic justice required more nuanced analysis of individual cases and economic impact, rather than broad generalizations about wealthy tax avoidance and elite privilege. The confrontation proved that effective tax policy required understanding complex economic relationships and individual circumstances rather than applying simple ideological frameworks to complicated financial situations.